India launched what is now known as the surgical strikes after the terror attack on an army base in Uri.
Uri is the darkest day of my life. 18th of September 2016, I lost 18 young lives on my watch.
Yeah.
I think that it led to an operation that had never been done before, the surgical strikes. That you cannot overcome the grief, but at least that gave us some closure.
How's the judge? Hi, sir. How's the judge? Hi, sir. I said, how's the judge? Hi, sir.
Why your book ends with this urging to your fellow soldiers, do not look at every Kashmiri Muslim with suspicion.
Every Muslim with a beard is not a terrorist. Every soldier with an AK rifle is not your enemy. He's actually helping.
Jammu and Kashmir Light Infantry, the Jatlai as it's called. Now, this is a very unusual sort of regiment because 50% are Muslims.
Yes. We carry the spirit of Kashmirian in the true sense by having an MMG.
Now, I should say that an MMG here is not a machine gun,
Yes.
but a mandir, masjid, Gurudwara. And I want you to tell our viewers, what is the concept? 8 years ago, on the 28th and 29th of September, the night intervening between these two dates, India launched what is now known as the surgical strikes after the terror attack on an army base in Uri. You were the officer who led that operation on the ground. You were the general officer commanding in the Kashmir Valley. It's been 8 years. Does it feel like 8 years or does it feel like yesterday?
It does feel like yesterday, because there are certain memories which are so vivid, so fresh in your mind, and that's the reason why it feels like yesterday. But I also want to start by saying on this topic, when everyone talks of Uri surgical strike, and when I go and give talks, especially to the youth in universities and colleges, everyone says, how's the Josh? And everyone gets fired up. It's a very good thing. It's a very good thing to get fired up by the patriotic sentiment. But for me, Barkha, I always say, Uri is the darkest day of my life. 18th of September 2016, I lost 18 young lives on my watch.
Yeah.
So I can never live that down till my dying day. But the only good thing was that very day, the defense minister, late Mr. Manor Parikar, arrived there, reached Srinagar on that very day, much against my protestations. Actually, I did not want VIPs on my hands that day. But, and I've written all this down. But I think his landing on that day, his giving us a clearance on the spot, and we suggesting to him something that had never been done before. I think that it led to an operation that had never been done before, the surgical strikes. That you cannot overcome the grief, but at least that gave us some closure.
Now, of course, your new book, General reminisces the life under fire in Kashmir. We'll come to it in just a moment. But to stay on the surgical strikes and what happened in Uri, the movie, for most people who are not from the military or who are not from journalism, who are not from the government, for most people, their understanding of Uri and the operation afterwards is Vicky Kaushal's movie.
Right.
वो picture आपको कैसे लगी?
The movie whips up or strokes a very good, positive, patriotic sentiment in the whole country.
Yeah.
Even now, you hardly have anyone in any audience, any group, anyone who's not seen that movie. And it brings out a very positive sentiment. I appreciate that. But whenever I'm asked a question, and that's what I think you're implying now.
Yeah, is it close to reality?
Is it close to reality? I think the first disclaimer that comes before the movie starts says it all. This is inspired by true events.
Yeah.
So it is inspired by true events. There are so many things in the movie which are far away from reality, and I'm glad they are, because there are certain things that we would not like to disclose.
Yeah.
So it is not exact. It is inspired by the true, by the original incident that happened, everything that we went across. But how it was planned and how it was executed is really, they've taken creative liberties.
Now, in your writings about that dark day, as you call it, the 18 soldiers lost at, and I think you've documented how it was one battalion handing over to the other battalion, and so it was a sort of vulnerable moment that the terrorists were able to catch. You write quite clearly that when you were told that the defense minister was coming, you said, why is he coming right now? That's one more thing to handle. But then he came. He wanted to go to Uri. You said no to that. You met at, you thereafter had this all-important conversation at Badami Bagh, at the cantonment. And he looked at you and he said, when you explained everything, he said, what next? And you asked to speak to him alone without his officials.
Yes.
Do you remember that conversation?
Absolutely. Word for word.
Kya hua us conversation?
So like I said, and like you just also repeated just now, that I was briefing him in the operationals room. The army chief was there.
Yeah.
The army commander was, General Huda was there.
Yeah.
But Kashmir is my domain.
Yeah.
And that I want to clarify to the viewers, and that's the reason I was briefing and not my seniors.
Yeah.
Because I was in charge of whole of Kashmir. So when I briefed him, the whole thing that happened, then he asked, in fact, I still remember, he said in Hindi, and I've written it, to ab kya karna hai? And I realized what he wants to know, and I said, sir, if by that you mean what should our response be, then I would like to talk to you, then I would like to brief you in my office. Because there were about 30-35 officers, to include people from MOD, my own headquarters. So many their officers are there in the operations room. And then he said, yes, I would like to go to your chamber. I still remember the sentence. And the army chief, the army commander, we accompanied the defense minister to my office.
When you told him that the army was ready to cross the line of control, to hit terror bases on the other side, he had two questions.
Yes.
One was about collateral damage to civilian lives in Pakistan.
Yes.
Which I was really struck by that, because when we look at what's happening in Gaza, a lot of the criticism, those who criticize Israel, is that there is no cognizance of civilian life.
Yes.
But even after this terror attack, India was concerned that no collateral damage should take place to civilians in Pakistan. I want you to talk about that before I come to the second thing he said to you. That is a surgical strike. Surgical strike इसीलिए कहते हैं उसको.
Absolutely.
आप बताइए. नहीं, आप समझाइए.
You took my opening sentence out of my mouth.
आप better समझाइए.
You said it. That is what a surgical strike is all about. What I told him, what I suggested, we will hit the terrorists only, because terrorists come across the LOC.
Yeah.
They inflict violence on our soldiers as well as our civilians. They at times mutilate bodies and go back. And we only keep defending ourselves, always defensive.
Right.
We don't have terrorists to send across. I remember these are the words. We don't have terrorists to send across.
Yeah.
So, but let us do something that we've never done before. Remember that a few months before that, Pathankot terror attack had taken place.
Correct.
So there was a rage in the country. Yeah. And I said, we will go across and hit only the terrorists. Having explained that to him and without going into further details. So his question, there should be no collateral damage. I think it stems from the fact that at one level, people this side of the LOC or that side of the LOC.
Yeah.
We consider them our own. They are our own people. They are not responsible. The people at large are innocent people farming on both sides of the LOC. Yeah. They are just caught in, the fate has caught them in a vice, in a place like that.
Yeah.
So So I think that was a very good concern. Even we have that concern when we fire across the LOC or when we fire at terrorists. So we have that concern that terrorists should...
that no innocent civilians should be caught up in this. जो दूसरी बात उन्होंने आपसे कही मनोहर पारिकर ने, can you assure that there will be no casualties to the Indian side? And you said?
He said there should be no casualties. I said, sir, I agree with you. There should be no casualties. And I remember the exact sentence. I said, sir, but this is war. Kuch bhi ho sakta hai. Then I explained, sir, we should be mentally prepared to accept a few casualties. When I said that, believe me, Barkha, my heart sank because he kept quiet. And I thought to myself, galti kar di. I shouldn't have said this because the politician in him will not allow me now.
To do this.
Yeah, because when we let's say show up 5 or 10 casualties, I'm talking the politics now, the opposition will tear them up and things like that. All it will go sour.
Correct.
And before that, I had already suggested to him, Pakistan keeps denying sending infiltrators and says, "Ye aapke freedom fighters hain, we haven't sent infiltrators," and all that. Whereas we will take ownership after doing this and we will say, we did this. We did this because you did Uri. So that was a difference I was suggesting to him.
Right.
So when he kept quiet, when I mentioned there would be casualties, my heart sank because we were so close. He was giving permission without even saying that I'm going to speak to the Prime Minister and I'll let you know. He said, okay. But he thought for a moment and just said one word, Barobar. So,
and then you got your green signal. And then in 30 minutes, it was done.
Yes.
But it was done under the cover of darkness. There was going to be no communication on radio sets.
Yes.
You've documented all this in great detail because radio sets, radio frequencies can be intercepted. Codes were not to be used except at designated.
Couple of codes and bounds. That's it.
What was your biggest fear that night?
I think I've written that down also. Sitting in the operations room, every time a phone would ring. I mean, there were many officers in the operations room. We were coordinating with each other and all that. Not with the team per se, not with the teams that have gone across. Because I said no communication. Yeah. Generally sometimes senior officers have a habit of wanting to know, ab wahan pahunch gaye, have they reached here? What is the progress? Is everything going okay? Where the other side? So I said, but there was a lot of coordination going on amongst ourselves. The UAVs, the UAV feed, support systems, everything. Extrication systems in case something goes wrong, everything. Every time a phone would ring, there were many phones in the operations room. Every time a phone would ring, I would actually curl my toes. I wanted to, I was half expecting bad news. And so my biggest concern during that raid that was going on, raids that were going on was, we should not have any casualties. I mean, I found myself oddly praying for no casualties more than the success of the mission.
Why? Because you had already lost 18 soldiers.
We lost 18 soldiers, but I also say this every time, and I've written in articles and otherwise also, this is my view. Barkha, when we fight on the borders, whether it is LOC, LAC, international border, whether it was 65 war, 71 war, Kargil war, when we fight the enemy at the borders, the Indian Army fights with that ethos of last man, last round. We have to defend our country with the last man, last round. You take Rizangla, there are many such operations. Longewala, everyone was ready to sacrifice their lives. So we are ready to sacrifice our lives. But I believe, this is my view, that for counter-terrorism, I am not willing. I'm not willing to sacrifice even one soldier for 50 of these terrorists. Because I believe, I'm not saying that we don't have casualties, but I'm saying I would rather let them escape rather than one soldier die. Because a terrorist, to my mind, has a shelf life.
Correct.
Aaj nahi to kal marega, yahan nahi to wahan marega. I mean, this is what I should talk to my command, whatever level of command. I've always been in counter-terrorism operations. So my point is, this is the difference between fighting terrorists and fighting the enemy.
In the end, there were no casualties. It was a successful operation. you could sleep easy finally, to whatever degree. Of course, as you said, the loss of those 18 soldiers at Uri will always haunt you. What did we learn from that surgical strike? It was a highly politicized conversation, as it turned out. The opposition started saying, "Humne bhi kiya hai, pehle bhi hua hai." You have documented how, yes, pehle bhi hua hai, lekin ye pehli baar tha ki ye public domain mein place kar diya gaya ki yes, we have done it.
Yes. This is the difference. That's what I mentioned earlier also. We will take ownership. Every time, I recently also, another book was launched where they said we have not advertised it. And so I have been asked this question often in the last 6 years that I have retired, that pehle bhi hua hai. So how do you say that this is the first time? First, there are 3 differences.
Yeah.
The first is that in the magnitude, in the number of places that were attacked and the depth that we penetrated into, wo nahi hua hai. I mean, I've also done those operations as a colonel. I have been part of such operations on the LOC. I've been in combat and done those things. But this is the magnitude. Number 2, this is the first time that we also used other instruments of power. It was not only military. It was also diplomatic. If I can take a few seconds to tell you, this happened on 18th of September.
The Uri attack.
Terror attack was on 18th of September 2016. On 21st September, Nawaz Sharif was to, the UN General Assembly was in session, as it is now.
Yeah.
So, Nawaz Sharif, Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif was to speak on 21st. During those 3 days, we worked very hard. The country worked, I mean, the diplomats and all that worked very hard to make sure that Pakistan was truly isolated. A lot of publicity was given to it. And Nawaz Sharif was feeling small that day. 25th September was late Mrs. Sushma Swaraj's speech. Our foreign minister was speaking in the General Assembly.
I remember.
We decided to keep the date after that. So that just in case things go wrong, something happens.
Correct.
And then she should not be in a similar position like Nawaz Sharif.
Right.
You know? So I am trying to say that, and Pakistan was isolated diplomatically. So this was the second thing, that other instruments of power were also used. And the third and the most important one is this fact of taking ownership. We had the Director General of Military Operations, and the world only knows that Director General of Military Operations came in front of the television, in front of the world media at a pre-announced time and said to the world, we did it because you did Uri and we don't want to escalate it further. But what world doesn't realize, though he said this in his opening sentence, I have just now called up my counterpart in Pakistan. He called up the Director of Military Operations, his counterpart in Pakistan, and said, we have done this.
And then said, our mission is complete.
Our mission is complete.
Pakistan obviously never accepted it. That's a given. But what do you think it changed? Did it draw a new red line? Pakistan's support for terrorism has not stopped.
Yes.
We are seeing the Pir Panjal range in the Jammu region emerge as a new epicenter, even more than the Kashmir Valley. By placing it by doing it on this scale, doing it very quickly, it was 10 days after the terror attack at the Uri base that we responded. And by placing it in the public domain, then picking up the phone and saying to Pakistan, we've done this, and you do this again, and we will do it again. And sure enough, Pulwama happens and Balakot happens, right? Now the question is, are we now, how do we determine? It's a difficult question, and I know there are no easy answers. But do we cross every time? Do we respond in the same way every time? Because Pakistan's support for terrorism has not stopped.
Yes. So, I think in one of your Mojo Story shows also, I answered then when we were having a lot of spate of terror attacks, and I answered this. When you say that there was a lot of clamor for surgical strike. We must do this.
Because see, people don't understand. People understand it in a layperson way. They'll say, ki aapne tab kiya, aap kyun nahi kar rahe? Why are we not doing another surgical strike? Of course, we could be doing another surgical strike, and not everything is placed in the public domain.
I was going to say that. One is that.
Yes.
Everything cannot be placed in public domain. But secondly, when you say, when there is a spectacular attack, how much is spectacular?
Yeah.
Can we place a figure to it?
Yeah, it's very difficult.
When 9 pilgrims were killed in Riyasi, is that good enough? or do we need to wait for 18 or 40?
Yeah.
So it's a very subjective thing. I don't think we can just count. We can't do a bean count here.
Yeah.
But the other good thing has happened is that today Pakistan Army is also on the defensive. On the line of control, they lay ambushes. They are always worried perpetually. Every night they do patrolling and ambushes because they know anytime kuch bhi ho sakta hai. So we've imposed that kind of caution on them, the caution with which we have been living for decades.
Yeah. Let's come to your newest book, A General Reminiscence. Now, as we talk, Jammu and Kashmir is in the middle of an election, a historic election, the first in 10 years. The first after the removal of the special status of Jammu and Kashmir, which is loosely known as 370. Your book comes across as a portrait of many things, but also a deep and abiding love for the people of Jammu and Kashmir, many of whom have served alongside you. And in particular, one of the very moving portraits in your book is of a man who, as you say, starts his life as a terrorist, then becomes what is known as an Ikhwan, which was surrendered militants, and then eventually becomes a decorated, valorized soldier of the army who basically gives his life for India. Tell us Nazir's story.
Before telling you Nazir's story, I want to point out a coincidence on which these narratives are based.
Okay.
I was commissioned in December 79. And my first posting was in Srinagar in January 80. Few months after I reported to Jammu and Kashmir Light Infantry Center, that is Jackalai, my regiment center. Those days it was very close to Lal Chowk in Hafchinar.
Yeah.
Few months after that, Nazir Wani was born in Kulgam.
Really?
And I retired on 31st of October 2018. 24 days after that, he made the supreme sacrifice. Nazir Wani made the supreme sacrifice.
So destiny had some connection between you and him.
Yes, and he was awarded Ashok Chakra posthumously for that operation, having already earned 2 Sena medals in different operations. So all I'm trying to point out is my entire service, which is in Jammu and Kashmir Light Infantry Regiment, and his entire life ran concurrently. And that is how these two narratives crisscross.
Now, many people, before we come to Nazir, many people don't know what is an Ikhwan.
Yes.
Or they think Ikhwan, they think Kuka Pare. Yeah. They at most know one name. He was certainly the best known face of the Ikhwans. The Ikhwans now have been integrated, as you write, into the territorial army, into regular regiments. But there was a time when they were almost like a separate force.
Yes.
And they were all surrendered terrorists, surrendered militants, but they were allowed to keep their arms. And they were a very, if you went to South Kashmir, you could meet Ikhwans, they would be on the streets, they would be holding their guns. They were very difficult times in Jammu and Kashmir. And they became a very hotly debated. People criticized them also. You also say sometimes there was excess, they misused the fact that they were armed. How do you look at that experiment with Ikhwans? The critics called it a private militia.
Yes.
The Faujis and the security forces have always said that they were an instrument in the fight against terrorism.
Yes. So, you see, I have taken Nazir's as my protagonist.
To explain
not only Ikhwan, to explain how what was our state response? When I say state, means national, state and military put together. What was our response to terrorism that started in this flagrant way in 1988-89? How we raised Rashtriya Rifles, how we raised Ikhwan, then Territorial Army Battalion, how we increased Rashtriya Rifles, etc. So coming to your question now about Ikhwan. Ikhwan is an element of the surrendered militants, surrendered terrorists. And this is not something that unprecedented. It has happened across the world. There are those Contra rebels in South America. There are many other places. What we did in 1993, initially it started off by an organization called JKSLF. It was Jammu and Kashmir Students Liberation Front. And by word student, you can understand that they were slightly more educated lot. they got disillusioned by Pakistan's modus operandi very soon, and they realized, they was little educated a lot, and they realized that Pakistan is using them for their own ends. So many of them wanted to surrender, wanted to come over. And I think we must give credit to those who were involved in a big measure, that is whether it was army, intelligence agencies, JK police, all put together, and many maybe more, all government itself took a very bold step of integrating them or getting them overboard. They formed something called Ikhwan. Ikhwan, the word Ikhwan means brotherhood. So these Ikhwan, like you brought out, they knew everything about terrorists. They were terrorists themselves, but they have come overboard. So they could generate real-time intelligence. I mean, actionable intelligence. That means it was not an information of what happened 2 days ago in Rajwar forest. They would tell them what is going to happen tomorrow evening. Not only that, when I have operated at different ranks and levels, when you actually reach a place, it's such a large area, even if you know a location of terrorist hideout or meeting, a very large area, by the time you start combing it, you really, they either melt away, or you lose them, or you lose half of them. They actually led the operation. I mean, they acted as guides during the operation. So they led our soldiers, they led the policemen to the hideout. So they actually participated in the operations that way. So they were so effective that I think we can credit the 1996 elections in a large measure to the Ikhwan's help in this thing. And Mr. Dullat writes in his book, I mean, 1996 election, as you all know, you've been a Kashmir watcher yourself. I mean, it really turned.
So to Nazir's story, right? So it's a very sad and moving story in a way, but it's a story worth telling, and you tell it in your book about. And he obviously had a deep impact on you, right?
Yes.
What was it about Nazir that moved you so much?
To be very frank, I have met Nazir only once. I mean, when I was because you see, for me, he was another Jackal soldier.
Correct.
They were Jackal soldiers. He had Sena medal, true. While I was in service, he had one Sena medal. While I was corps commander, till then he had one Sena medal. There are so many Jackal soldiers or other soldiers who are Sena medal awardees. So he is one of the brave soldiers. I still remember that after we eliminated Abu Qasim, one of the terrorist leaders of Daesh, after that, I was the corps commander. I went to Visu, that company which took part in the operation, our company. I was introduced to those who took part. He was one of them. And since there were 3 or 4 of these Jackal boys, my own regiment boys, I had an extra word with them, and that's it. So I met him that time. But during my career, ever since this Territorial Army Battalion Home and Earth was raised, and we'll talk about this later, I really wanted to write about this Territorial Army Battalion. This Territorial Army Battalion is so, or shall I just cover it now in 2 sentences? So, after Ikhwan was wound up in 2003, 2004, when it was wound up, then if Ikhwan was a bold experiment, this was a bolder experiment. And I don't know, arguably this is the only, it's unprecedented in the world.
Tell us the experiment.
Yes. And in fact, the chapter is also called Bolder Experiment.
Yes.
We wound up Ikhwan. We raised an army battalion of these surrendered terrorists. And I take one full chapter to describe how difficult it was to convert these renegades into soldiers. Despite the fact that they wanted to help the army, but to convert a rebel to a soldier. I mean, he may be good in fighting, good in generating intelligence, but he doesn't want to get up for PT, he doesn't want to cut his hair, he doesn't want to stick to timings, he doesn't want to stick to, he doesn't want to do drill when there is no requirement and things like that. So it's interesting to see how they were converted. But at a higher level, it was a very good experiment because we got them to take pride in the soldiers. And Nazir's story tells us how he took pride in becoming a soldier. In fact, one of them told me when I was Mushtaq, I was interviewing him, he says, terrorists मरते थे, उनकी bodies पड़ी रहती थी. The way he said how their bodies were degraded and defiled, I mean, or they were not given the due respect.
Yeah.
That's what they felt. I says today, now that we are soldiers, not that they were casualties amongst them. They had, हम तिरंगे में लिपट के आते हैं. You know, so that was something that even I also realized the enormity of it when I interviewed, Nazir.
It's an extraordinary story to think of this young Kashmiri man who, as you said, starts as a terrorist, becomes an Ikhwan, then becomes a soldier who gives his life for India. And it's a very moving story in your book. But let's zoom out and talk about the Jammu and Kashmir Light Infantry, the JACLI as it's called. Now, this is a very unusual sort of regiment because 50% are Muslims.
Yes.
And before we come to your sort of larger feelings about it, one of the moving things that you write in your book is urging your fellow soldiers to not look at Kashmiri Muslims who come into the army with suspicion. And you draw an analogy with the Sikhs, who at one point, there was the Khalistanis, but they were the very, very brave Sikh soldiers. You also draw
Despite the mutinies.
Despite the mutinies, you draw an interesting parallel with the Baluch regiment in Pakistan, where there's a separatist challenge to Pakistan in Baluchistan, but there are brave soldiers. As a soldier, you can admire the Pakistan soldiers at a professional level. Talk about this, why your book ends with this urging to your fellow soldiers, do not look at every Kashmiri Muslim with suspicion. When he comes into the unit, when he transforms his life as Nazir did, or that's a separate story. Sometimes they're direct recruits, and these are, voluntary recruitments also take place. The lens of suspicion, you urge for that lens to be dropped.
Yes. So, Barkha, I also explain in this, so allow me to take 30 seconds to explain this first.
I think you should tell people why JACLI is such an unusual regiment. That is, I think, something very important to know.
Firstly, Jammu and Kashmir Light Infantry is the only regiment in which the soldiers are from J&K only.
That's right.
There are other regiments who draw from J&K, whether it is JACRIF and other regiments, but even Punjab regiment has people from Jammu region, but they also have soldiers from other states, whereas this is
purely from Jammu.
And it is so because our regiment is the only regiment that was not formed as a result of recruitment rallies, but it was purely a volunteer force when Pakistan invaders came into Kashmir in 1947-48, in many different places, in Baramulla, Maqbool Sherwani got up. They were all civilians. They got up with their weapons. So many resistance groups rose up in many areas with their personal weapons. They started resisting the Pakistani invaders. My own battalion was raised like that as a border scouts in Poonch. So this is what happened. Nubra scouts were raised in Ladakh. So this is what happened. So my entire, all these small motley groups were converted into a paramilitary force called Jammu and Kashmir Militia after that operation was over, or during that operation itself. And we continued like that till 1971. 1971 war, the regiment did very well in many places. My own battalion got 2 battle honors, 3 Veer Chakras, 2 Sena medals, mentioned dispatches. So then the entire regiment in 1972, all these paramilitary, was converted to Jammu and Kashmir, a regular army. So what is different also is that we have 50% Muslims, as you said, 40% Dogras and 10% Sikhs. Another point of difference is that this regiment, we are mixed down to section level. A section is the last unit of 10 men. I'm just saying that for viewers. You know that very well. So they are all mixed. Like there are some regiments which have 2 companies of Jats and 2 companies of Rajputs. You know, something like that. That also brings out the best in the soldiers, that kind of feeling of competition. But we are mixed down. So in every company, when meals are cooked, it is the halal and jhatka separate. So we live together very much like that. And when you look over your shoulders, whether it's for a pass in football, in a team, or when you look for over your shoulder for fire support coming during an encounter, you don't see if that man is a Muslim or a Dogra. I mean, for you, he's your blood brother. That's how our regiment is different. And the last thing I would like to say is we carry the spirit of Kashmiriat in the true sense by having an MMG.
Now, I should say that an MMG here is not a machine gun, but a mandir, masjid, Gurudwara. And I want you to tell our viewers, what is the concept? I know the concept, but I want you to tell us.
Thank you, Barkha. This is, thank you for giving me the opportunity. This is something so dear to my...
No, it's such a beautiful concept, and more people should know about it.
So, Mandir, Masjid, Gurudwara, this concept actually was started by General Chibba in 1984, if I remember correctly. So 1984, Mandir, he put all these three under one roof. He was a colonel of the regiment and Northern Army commander that time.
Yes.
He was a great visionary. And he started this concept. In fact, this Sarv Dharm Sthal concept that our Indian Army follows now all over in every station owes its origin to that.
To the MMG.
To the MMG concept by General Chibba. That was his vision. So in our Mandir, Masjid, Gurudwara, we pray together, all religions sit together, and we soldiers of all denominations sit together, we pray together. So if it is, let's say, Diwali, any festival, during that festival, there will be the complete aarti and everything else will be around this Hindu way of doing it. But after that, the Granthi will also say a small ardas will be also they will be recited, there will be ardas, we'll all sing the ardas together. Then we will also have the Maulvi Sahib doing his dua and then doing... So, we have everything together. During festivals, when I was with soldiers, during Ramzan, I have observed Roza.
You have observed Roza and you have led namaz prayers.
Yes, I have led namaz prayers.
So basically, a commanding officer adopts at that moment the faith of his troops, which means, and it's interchangeable, it's syncretic, which means Eid hai to namaz offer hogi, Diwali hai to aarti hogi, and at that time it doesn't matter ki aapki apni faith kya hai.
Absolutely. Can I
modify that a bit?
Yes, I need to modify that a bit.
Yes.
With due respects to you, you are a very learned person.
I'm paraphrasing it, maybe not as precisely as I should.
When you said, you said everything correct. When you said every commanding officer adopts that.
No, all officers.
All officers.
Yes.
All officers of Indian Army, we are trained like that, literally trained. You adopt the religion of the troops that you serve with, your battalion.
Yes.
I mean, even the British did that.
Yes.
So we adopt the religion, and like you said, then we go along with that. But in my case, we have 3 religions. In fact, we have 4 now.
Yes.
We have a smattering of Buddhists also. Okay. And of late, we have MMGG. There is a Gompa also.
Okay. How lovely.
Yes.
So, the thing is, I always say that itni secularism pe debates hoti hai. There's no better model of genuine secularism than the MMG concept. It's a really beautiful concept.
Absolutely.
And I remember one time there was some stupid social media controversy ki, how is so-and-so officer offering namaz? Yeah. How is so-and-so officer performing aarti? And you at that time said this is a non-issue because the MMG is all about no difference on the basis of faith. Celebrate all faiths. Now you took the MMG concept from your professional life into your personal life when your son got married.
Yes.
Can you share that story?
Not only that, I also took it to my home. You've covered it in one of your series 5 years ago.
But tell us.
So, you see, firstly, army is not a job. It's a way of life.
Yes.
So, if I'm a Jackal Eye officer, this has become my life. It is not that when I retire, I sort of leave that ethos behind. It's not only for me, it's also for my family. All our lives, we've gone to Mandir, Masjid, Gurudwaras together.
Yeah.
So in my house, when my wife, we made a puja ghar. So that puja ghar, uske bahar MMG अखरोट की लकड़ी में carve करके लिखा हुआ है. Plus also all the photos and symbols of all these religions are there.
Yes.
When my sons got married, we had the Panditji doing the fere, But we also had the Maulvi and the Granthi ji doing the Aarti and Dua and Aarti Ardas. Ardas.
Yes.
So we had that for both my sons' marriage.
Yes.
It's just that the first one did come, elder son didn't come much into limelight because it was during COVID days and there were guest restrictions, etc.
Yes.
But the second son drew the attention of national media. You covered it.
Yes.
So that photo of all the three Dharam Gurus blessing the children and doing the rites caught everyone's imagination, and my family is very happy for that.
It's beautiful. It really is beautiful. And I also remember once I was at a event to commemorate the Jammu and Kashmir Light Infantry. You were there, and there was the religious leaders had come to speak, and the Granthis and the Maulvis were speaking about how sometimes, if let's say the Maulvi Sahib is on leave, the Granthi can step in, and vice versa. Can you tell us how that works?
So I remember that incident which was in Manekshaw Hall many years ago. I was still serving, and you were there. So that Granthi, what he said was that that particular incident that he quoted then was in one of the battalions on the LOC.
Yes.
And at that time, for the Gurupurab, there was no Granthi.
Yes, correct.
Yes. Granthi was on leave or he wasn't present over there.
Right.
And the Maulvi conducted the Gurudwara Sahib's function that day. He spoke about whatever he could. After all religions lead to the same thing. He obviously was not able to recite the Ardas. Other boys would do it. But he got up and spoke. You give a pravachan, like we say. So when he is the Maulvi who conducted that. So, I mean, how beautiful is that?
I think the MMG model shows us that secularism is not tolerating. Tolerance, word hai na, it's not tolerating, it's
participate. You said it again.
Beautiful. In the end, because the book is here, A General Reminisces, A Life Under Fire in Kashmir. We are talking at a time, as I said in my opening, elections are taking place. Your epilogue ends with what happens after 370 is gone. And we'll have to wait some time to understand fully, historically, what changes it brings. But we're seeing a very, very important, a very, very intriguing election. More people voted in the Baramulla Lok Sabha election than in Mumbai.
Yes.
So, just a thing to consider.
Yes.
How do you look at Jammu and Kashmir today, post 370?
We are in very interesting times, but these are also very sensitive times.
Yeah.
On one hand, a lot of developmental work activity has gone on in the last 5 years after Article 370 was diluted and the state was made into union territory. Panchayat elections have been held, 3-tier panchayat is in place, development activities, malls, cinema hall. I mean, the life has changed, no violence on the streets. And, so everything is happening. But on the other hand, the political process at the state UT level has started now. Lok Sabha elections, now we have held this after 10 years. Getting back to the point of why it is sensitive. When you give, when people give vent to their political aspirations, we already have some, now in Lok Sabha elections, some members have been elected on whom questions are being raised.
Engineer Rashid.
Engineer Rashid is someone we wouldn't have initially thought.
Yes.
So we know their proclivities and tendencies. Now Jamaat, there are many affiliated to Jamaat who are taking part in elections. It's a democratic process. They are all allowed. That's what democracy is all about. But at the end of it, what does that political process throw up?
Yeah.
Will it really throw up a very decisive mandate? I personally doubt that.
we have absolutely no idea at this point.
Firstly, we have no idea because it has never happened.
And to count some of the kind of experimental characters who are in the fray, there is Engineer Rashid, who of course won the Lok Sabha. The Jamaat-e-Islami has backed at least 10 candidates. There is Afzal Guru, the parliament attack convict's brother. So, ye ho raha hai aaj.
And there may be many more.
And there may be many more who we have not yet identified.
Yes. So you're right. So it is, we have to be careful.
Yeah.
The gains that we have made, and I say the state has made, the country has made in the last 5 years, we should not sort of fritter them away. So it requires very careful and judicious handling. You see, Northeast had quietened down. Suddenly it's on the boil again.
Yeah.
Manipur has gone bad.
Yeah.
So we have to make sure that all the gains don't slip away.
I want to end by this, what it means to be a soldier. And before I come to that, before there was the National War Memorial, we did not even have a kind of centralized national place where families, the last you had was India Gate, which stood to the fallen soldier. But
World War
I. Yeah. The National War Memorial is a very important milestone in our country learning to genuinely acknowledge the place of a soldier in our lives. You were actively involved in making that a reality. What did that mean to you, to have a National War Memorial?
I, as Chief of Integrated Defence Staff, I steered the construction of National War Memorial. It was an honor. It was an honor for me. Yeah. From design selection to construction, I steered the construction of it. And one sentence, I can actually summarize it by that one sentence first that I've written in the book. Just as I ended my operational service with a good operation in the Uri surgical strikes, similarly, I think I ended my army service by having that honor of constructing this National War Memorial, a befitting tribute. Our country, that we didn't have it for more than 7 decades, is unthinkable. I think it was, we owe it to the leadership that they gave us a place near India Gate, 40 acres of it. Who would have thought? And I bring out how it is, initially we were not getting this land. And the names of all over 26,000 of those who have lost or made the supreme sacrifice after independence are there. One brick for every soldier, sailor or airman. And I think it's a very simple but an elegant design, befitting for a memorial, and somewhere that we now can go and pay homage in the correct manner. India Gate was a World War I memorial, and so it was different. Amar Jawan Jyoti was made for 1971, after 1971. And I think it has been an honor to do this. But can I take 30 seconds more?
Yes, of course.
It's something that got lost.
Yeah.
You asked me this question, but in my answering, perhaps it was my fault. You asked me what is the difference between a jackal-eye soldier, and I was trying to point out as to how some see it like this. Then I did not answer this question. So allow me to end with this.
Please.
A youngster, let me start by saying this. A young man in Jammu and Kashmir, when he comes for a recruitment rally, they come in thousands. And I remember nearly 10 years ago, I did a buck stops here with you in NDTV.
Yes.
And you asked me this question. And in response to some question, I said, how do you explain then that for 45 or 50 vacancies, 45,000 candidates turn up if you say that patriotism is dead over here? So this man wants to walk into the army. All of them can't. It's a vacancy-based thing. And all those who are selected as soldiers, how they are different from those who were those days pelting stones or picking up guns. We take this young man, put him through training in Jackal-eye or any other regiment as a soldier, and he is then removed from those influences. Literally, he is placed in an army camp. Then not only he is trained as a soldier after that 1 year of training or lesser, he then moves away from that atmosphere of Jammu and Kashmir and he serves all over the country. So firstly, he's removed from the influences. Secondly, he starts to see how India has progressed, how the world is growing. So his world vision literally changes. Whereas that man, who also perhaps tried once for the army recruitment, could not succeed, and then he gets radicalized, then he picks up a gun and this thing. So all I was trying to bring out, I've been trying to bring out here to everyone is, and then we see everyone trusts all soldiers equally. But some soldiers, some amongst us still can't get away from the fact that they feel if a Kashmiri Muslim would perhaps not be a good soldier.
Yeah.
And the trust deficit shows at times.
Which is not fair.
Which is not fair. It irks people like me who have soldiers. If you were to count the bravery awards of Kashmiri Muslims as soldiers, they outnumber, otherwise they would outnumber others. You know, they are perhaps one amongst the very few examples of soldiers who are deployed in their home region. It is tough because their families are under threat by terrorists, by others, because why is your husband or your son serving the Indian army against us and things like that. And I like to end with one sentence which I've written, I think, a couple of times in this. It has always been my endeavor to explain to every soldier that every Muslim with a beard is not a terrorist. And just like I always explain to every soldier and officer, then I explained that every Kashmiri Muslim or Muslim with a beard is not a terrorist. Just like I would like to explain to the awam, to everyone, always saying that every soldier with an AK rifle is not your enemy. He's actually helping you.
Yeah, I think that's the perfect note to close this conversation on. I do want to say that the soldier, they always say you can't take a soldier out of a Fauji. No matter, a soldier never retires. And when we see the images of you speeding away on your motorcycle on weekends, your motorcycle has a name. Kya naam hai motorcycle ka? one of your
Black Cat.
Meri helmet.
Sorry. No, that I write Main aur Meri helmet.
Main aur Meri helmet. Okay. So it's not unusual to see you zipping away on your motorcycle, riding horses. You've kept that spirit of adventure and exploration alive, and long may you have that josh of being a soldier, being a general, a leader. General Reminiscences, A Life Under Fire in Kashmir is now out. We are talking to General Dua on the very date that 8 years ago the surgical strikes took place, and with the man who led them and oversaw them. Thank you, sir. Always a pleasure.
Thank you very much. Jai Hind.
Jai Hind, sir. Thank you.